My name is Simon Benninga. I'm a professor in this building. I have two pleasant duties, which I'm going to dispense with in about 90 seconds. One is I want to tell you a little bit about where this program comes from today. We started this year in the Recanati School of Business. We started a one-year English language MBA program. It's called the Sofer International MBA program. And we have, in our first year of existence, 55 wonderful students from 21 countries. And we still have a few places left for next year, so if you want to register, talk to us after the program. That's the first thing. The second thing is to introduce Saul Singer. Before I introduce Saul, let me thank one or two people from the program who put this all together. Aaron Kopilov, who is our admissions director and is standing in the back. Adam Altman, Aliza Ginsburg, Ed McGeady, Dikla Smith, and Ofer Lifshitz all put this program together, helped put this program together, and I want to thank everybody for doing a great job. Not enough people, but next time we'll have more people. Okay, so Saul Singer. So Saul, I think, actually needs very little introduction. He has written one of the bestsellers of the last year, amazingly enough, about this amazing little country, and it's called Startup Nation. Saul lives in, the co-author is Dan Signor. We have to always give credit, right? Saul lives in Jerusalem. His book has been called A Playbook for Every CEO Who Wants to Develop the Next Generation of Corporate Leaders. It's not his first book. He's written a book about the Middle East. He's been a correspondent for Newsweek, CNN Opinion, Commentary, and a lot of other things. I'm sure I don't do you any justice whatsoever, but we're happy to have you here, and the show is yours. Thank you very much.
It's great to be here, and I have to disclose that Aaron and I have been working on this for months and months, and it's very exciting to be here with this incredible panel. And even just the process of thinking through how we're going to talk about what's next for the Startup Nation has been exciting for me, because I've been going around in the United States and elsewhere talking about the book, many times kind of giving a similar speech about what's in the book, why it's exciting and interesting and so on. But I want to try to do something a little different this time. And that is to think about what's next. And yet I do want to talk somewhat about what is, in terms of what the book talks about where all this comes from. Because that's really what the book is about. And when I talk about the book, tend to talk about three words in it, in the title: startup, story, and miracle. And the startup part is really the shortest part of the book, in the sense of startup in the metrics and kind of how amazing the performance of Israel has been. Of course, we go into the number of companies on NASDAQ, and when we wrote the book, Israel was the #1 country outside the United States in terms of companies on NASDAQ. Since then, we have almost 70 companies. Since then, China has passed us over about 100 companies, but we're still, I think, slightly ahead in per capita terms in China. I'm not good at math, but I think it comes out that way. But to me, actually, the most important metric is the one for venture capital, because this is where the investment community of the world is trying to figure out where to put its money, and there's no sentiment about it. It's its water flows to the lowest place. Well, venture capital tries to flow to the place where the next Facebook or Microsoft or Google is going to come out. And of course, most startups fail, and you hope that one of these investments is going to hit it big. And so the real metric is, where is the venture capital going? And in 2008, Israel got 2.5 times as much venture capital as the United States in per capita terms, 30 times Europe, and many times more than India and China. So these are we go through this kind of just as an introduction in the book. The more interesting question is, why here? Why did it happen in Israel, not in Korea or Finland or Sweden or all kinds of places? Why are there more startups here than in any country on a per capita basis, maybe second only to the United States in absolute terms? What is it about Israel? And we tell a lot of stories in the book, and I want to keep this short, so I'm just going to tell one story that I think illustrates a lot of the things that a lot of the stories in the book are about, because we wanted the book to be readable, so that's one reason we use stories. But the other reason is because we're talking essentially about culture. It's not a business, it's a business book, but it's not a textbook. Neither Dan or I are trained in economics. Dan went to Harvard Business School. I have more of a kind of government and journalism background. So we were focused on the cultural aspects, and the way to talk about a culture is through stories. And one is about a guy named Scott Thompson, who is head of a company you may have heard of called PayPal. And PayPal was bought by eBay. And the main investor in eBay was Benchmark Capital. And Benchmark was here, like most venture capital funds are, and looking around, and they found a company called Fraud Sciences, tiny little company. And this is about in the 2007 time frame. And Benchmark was looking at this fraud sciences thing, and they decided to ask their expert on things like fraud, credit card fraud, who was Scott Thompson, to meet to check out the company. So Svat Shaked, one of the founders, is in there with Scott Thompson, and Scott asked him, so what's your big secret for beating credit card fraud? He's pretty skeptical about all this, and so Svat said, well, I was in the army like most Israelis, and our job was to try to track terrorists over the internet. So what we would do is we would look for, we kind of figured out that the terrorists and other bad people don't leave a lot of traces of themselves over the internet. And good people, normal people, they're not hiding anything, so there's traces all over the place, passwords, all kinds of stuff. So all you do is you look for traces, and you've got good people. You don't find traces, you've got bad people, and Shalom Yisrael. I don't think he said that, but that was the idea. And so Scott Thompson says, well, okay, now he's even more regretting taking this meeting. He's a busy guy, but it's some crazy theory about good people and bad people. What is all this? He said, okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. Svat told him that he had already processed 40,000 transactions over 5 years, and he only got about 14 wrong. But, that's not really interesting for a company the size of PayPal. So Thompson realized a very simple way to get rid of this guy, and that is give him a test that's completely valid, which is, he said he'll give him 100,000 transactions that PayPal already processed. So PayPal knew how they turned out. And Scott Thompson had to scrub the names from the transactions for privacy reasons, which made it harder. But he said, okay, you take these 100,000 transactions and see what you can do. And he figured he'd never see the guy again. It took him 5 years to do 40,000, 100,000 transactions. So Svat goes back home to Israel, and this is about a Thursday. And around Sunday, Thompson gets the email back. 2 words, we're done. So, Thompson is kind of shocked. He gives the data to his 50 PhD engineers, just the top people in the company. And they're pouring through the data, and it takes them over a week, and they're still not done. But they get the idea that on the transactions that PayPal had the most problem with, Fraud Sciences had done 17% better. And that's a game changer in an industry like this. So, Thompson goes running to Meg Whitman, the head of eBay, and says, we can't let Benchmark invest in this company. We can't let anybody else invest. We have to buy this company. And then they're in a bind, of course, because he knows the minute he tells Schwat how well he did on the test, that the price would go through the roof. But, it has no choice. He offers $80 million, and a very quick negotiation. They agree on $170 million. And the next thing, is Scott Thompson is on his way to a country he'd never thought about, Israel. And probably never met an Israeli before he met Schwat, but he's on his way to Israel to see the company that he just bought. And he's on the airplane, he's waking up, he's seeing the icon of the plane coming in, and he sees the picture there, and he sees all the cities right around Israel, because it's just about to land. And it's, Beirut.
Speak up, because they can hear you.
Sorry. Beirut, Cairo, Damascus, Amman. He thinks, I'm flying into a war zone. I'm like, I bought a company in a war zone. So he's kind of has a little panic attack, but he gets over that, and he shows up in the parking lot of what was Fraud Sciences, and every car has a PayPal bumper sticker on it. He's very impressed with that instant loyalty. And then he starts talking to the group, the whole company, which is much smaller than this audience. And he's impressed that they're not fidgeting, they're not texting, nothing. They're rapt attention, and that part struck me as not very Israeli, but that's what Thompson told me. So what can I say? We interviewed him a few times. It was very fun. And then he starts opening it for questions. And he's expecting questions like, you just bought us, so how are they going to integrate our two companies? How is it going to work? None of that kind of stuff. It's all, why do you do things this way? Why not that way? What's wrong with your business model? Tough, penetrating questions. Nobody's afraid of the big CEO who just bought us and that kind of stuff. And he starts kind of sweating out there and thinking, I thought I bought this company. It's like they bought me. And this is Scott Thompson getting the Israel treatment. And, this kind of things, this is very recognizable to us here in Israel. We know what this is about. But we take it for granted. But, people who come from outside, it's something new to them. And it's not something that exists everywhere else. We don't respect authority that much. We're not into hierarchy. We're very flat, not in the Tom Friedman sense, but in the sense of lack of hierarchy. And it's so much so that Google. I have to be careful here because Meir Brand from Google is here, but I consider Google probably one of the flattest companies in America, among big companies, a company that prides itself on lack of hierarchy, on the ability to challenge, and everybody kind of in the same kind of cubicle, and not a lot of barriers to big executives. But I will not reveal anything. What Meir told us for the book, that when the big executives from Google come to Israel, they get the Scott Thompson treatment, and they're surprised how much they get challenged. And in effect, what's happened is that Israel is Googlier than Google. We're even more, and you can talk more about, how Israeli culture fits into the Google culture. It's very interesting. But I want to shift now to what's next. And what I'm going to do here is kind of as we get into the panel, we're going to be asking what's next for Israel and for the startup nation. And I want to throw out two ideas that I'm excited about in terms of where things are going or where they should be going. And one is actually I got from Chemi. And that is, Chemi, I think, was talking to Dan, and Dan got very excited because Dan called me up and said, Chemi says that Israel could actually be the starting place for solving world problems, global problems. And I thought, well, it's one thing to say that that technology is going to solve global problems, but how do you know the technology is going to come from Israel? That may be a bit of a stretch even for me. And then I went to sit with Chemi, and we were talking about this, and he was explaining how the way it could work is the way it's working with Better Place. I mean, here's a company that's going to show the world, starting the end of next year, how a entire country can get off of oil. And I'm very excited. I'm going to go out and buy an electric car. I'm going to be able to drive all around the country, charge it up, have swap stations. This country is going to go electric. And we're going to be the first country in the world to do it. It's happening almost simultaneously in Denmark, and then it's going to happen in Australia, which shows that it can happen in big countries. And it's a great example of Israel as a beta country. A country where you take a global problem and you try to solve it in one small country in a way that's scalable for other countries to copy. And this actually is a realistic way, I think, that Israel could become a platform kind of for solving world problems. I'm excited by this. We're going to throw this out later to the panel and have different perspectives on it. I think it could be a big part of what's next. And if I had to nominate a problem to start with first, it would be education. We obviously have the issue of brain drain. We have the problem of our secondary schools, of the scores here. But it's not just our problem. They have the problem in the United States. They have the problem in many other countries. And even in the countries that are farthest along in education still probably could do better. I mean, and there's a very interesting company called Time to Know that's thinking about how to reinvent the classroom. Why can't we solve our own educational problem here, become a model for the world, and solve our problem at the same time? The second thing I want to throw out there in terms of what's next, in terms of almost my dreams, is that one issue here is that we have almost two economies. We have the high-tech economy and we have everything else. And the high-tech economy is overperforming, and it's performing so well that, in fact, that Israel has, according to the latest competitive index, has moved from 25 up to 17. And I would argue that maybe that's too low. I think they're undercounting the whole venture capital thing in that index. That Israel is already growing faster than any country in the developed world, but we can be growing faster, and more importantly, we can be growing more evenly. I think that the rest of our economy, there's no reason why it can't grow, instead of performing either average or below average, which it is now, it should be performing at least, or get closer to where the high-tech sector is performing. And how do you do that? I think that there are lessons that we can take from the good treatment. The governments of Israel over time have learned to coddle the high-tech sector. It took some time, it took some doing, but eventually we kind of understood both parties and all different kinds of governments, that we can't kill the golden goose, we must help it, we must coddle it. And yet with the rest of the economy, I feel like the attitude is we can abuse it as much as we want, no problem. And in terms of taxes, regulations, competitive environment, all these things that are very good in the high-tech sector are not so good in the rest of the economy. And I think if we only treated the rest of the economy as well as we treat high-tech, and not so much by throwing money at it, it's more a question of regulations, the regulatory environment, the tax environment. Just let it work. Let it run. The competitive environment, let it work the way high-tech is working. I think there are probably other ideas. I'd be interested to hear the panel later on, other ideas, how we spread the success of the high-tech economy to the rest of the economy. And, I don't think it's, like some people I think resent almost high-tech because high-tech is successful and the rest is not. And like, why can't more people work in high-tech and so on? What I tell them is that, without high-tech, the exports of Israel were basically oranges. I mean, it was basically kind of going along the bottom like this of the graph, like that. And when high-tech kicked in, the Israeli exports went up like that. And so without high-tech, we just have oranges. And we wouldn't want that. The goal is not to blame high-tech. The goal is to bring what succeeded about high-tech to the rest of the economy. So the way we plan to do that, I think I want to leave as much time as possible for this panel. So I'm going to end it there. And the way we're going to work this is the questions will be at the end for me and for the panel. And I want to start by introducing our panelists, who also need no introduction. Yeah. We'll start with Chemi. Chemi is the managing general partner and co-founder of Patango. He's sitting on the boards of numerous companies. He's the chairman of a new fund called Al Bawadar, which is very interesting, a fund that's going to invest in the Arab sector in Israel and other, I think, other minority sectors. He's the chairman of the Israel-America Chamber of Commerce. He's on the advisory board of this school, or the Tel Aviv University's Recanati School of Business, not exactly this program. A member of the board of governors of the Weizmann Institute, was a pilot in the Israeli Air Force, and so on. Dr. Orna Berry is a venture partner at Gemini Israel Funds. She served as the chief scientist of Israel and director of the Industrial R&D Administration of the Ministry of Industry and Trade. She chaired the Israel Venture Association, and many of us know her from these conferences, the annual conferences of this association, great conferences. She received her PhD in computer science from the University of Southern California and MA and BA degrees from Tel Aviv and Haifa universities. David Furst is the president and CEO of Life Sci and vice chairman of the German Israel Life Sciences Division, is representing the biotech sector on this panel. A veteran of the Homeland Security and Electronic Industries, and switched over to life sciences. He's that's it, vice chairman. Advisory board on biodata and on the advisory board of Mediclever, and is an MBA from the Brunei University in West London, and a retired paratroop lieutenant colonel. Meir Brand, regional director of Google Israel, Greece, and South Africa. And in fact, in many of we're starting to kind of bring Startup Nation tours to Israel, kind of the beginning of people coming around to see different companies. And one of the great stops that people have is to Google Israel, and they love seeing the Google logo and everything. And Meir Brand is great at presenting the Google story and the Israel story. He was at Microsoft, Booz Allen Hamilton, at P&G previously, and he was also involved with ICQ as a BA from Tel Aviv University and MBA from Harvard. And finally, Tal Keinan, a star in Startup Nation. In fact, many of this group have starred in the book, and I interviewed for the book. And Tal, I'll tell you a little secret. Can I tell the secret?
It's a secret. You gotta tell me first.
The Air Force pilot secret. Tal is also an Air Force pilot, and there's an Air Force pilot we talk about in the book. We used a pseudonym. And there are actually two Air Force pilots that we use pseudonyms for in the book, and one of them is Tal. And elsewhere in the book, we mention Tal by name. Because he's the partner and chairman and CEO of KCPS Company, which is in the financial services industry. He also went to Harvard, got an MBA from Harvard with Dan, and that's where Dan and Tal met. So we've known Tal for many years. And he served on the advisory board of the Aryav Commission, Joint Bank of Israel Ministry of Finance Task Force, and and has his BA from Tel Aviv University. So that was too long. Now, let's get into questions. Now, the first question is about, it starts with the question of the pace of change in global technology. 20 years ago, basically, the internet essentially didn't exist. Facebook, Google, nothing. Cell phones, everything we take for granted today basically wasn't here as we know it just 20 years ago. And this pace of change is increasing. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but not only is it going to continue, but it's increasing. And so when we're thinking about what's next for the startup nation, it's a moving target. Israel is, its claim to fame is being at the forefront, being at the edge, the cutting edge. And so, it's one thing if you're trying to play catch-up with everybody, but if you're trying to be the cutting edge, how do you stay at that cutting edge? And the first question we're going to deal with is the question of what's next for Israel. And I want everybody on the panel to take a few minutes in their turn to say what's next, not only for their industries, but kind of put it into global context, which you have to do because there's nothing that's just local in Israel. I mean, we're kind of global from day one. That's the way we are. We're playing on this global playing field, so we have to be aware of kind of what's next for the world as we're thinking of what's next for Israel. So that's a difficult thing to do, five minutes or so. So that's the first question, is what's next for Israel in the global context? And Chemi, you can start. Okay.
Ladies first.
Orna.
Thank you very much. I think that what is next for Israel, I will start by the fact that I don't believe in evolving without having the right ecosystem. And consequently, I believe that we'll have to have some structural changes in our political structures, in our educational structures, but that's not what I'm going to talk about in 5 minutes. I'm going to say that I believe in expansion in several ways. First of all, we were predominantly in information and communication technologies, in developing technologies that were cutting edge. I believe that we shall also deploy technologies to get other sectors more efficient and more productive than they are now. And consequently, I expect to see, for example, in traditional industries, deployment of applications that come from cloud computing and consequently improve productivity and also create products in cloud computing and in enterprise software type work. There are lots of derivatives from past technologies, and the most important factor, I think, is the behavioral pattern that is somewhat caused by education and somewhat caused by circumstances of we are going to get it done. And going to get it done applies to everything. Earlier, Saul and referred to Chemi mentioned the Better Place. Better Place is an entrepreneur, an outstanding entrepreneur, and an outstanding team, a global team, that came out of different type industries and went into the deployment of logistics and infrastructure in order to prevent the need and the use of oil, fossil oil, that is, for us, also a political problem. It's not only the fact that the fluctuations of an oil barrel are important. It's also an issue that we get oil from countries that many of them are not democratic, and we don't have a very stable relationship with the resources. So this is a very important local solution which can become a global solution, and it's not the only one. We're talking about using semiconductor equipment and shifting it into solar energy. We're talking about aviation and airborne products and turning them into wind-based alternative energy. And water, I did not mention, recycling of water, variety of technologies that can be made into very large components in the economy. We should not be dependent only on information and communication technology. We shall be dependent on the personality, the traits that we have developed of getting it done. And we shall move into other sectors. There will be regulation, but even before the regulation, there will be sufficient number of entrepreneurs. If we looked at the market in Israel and the opportunities to invest in alternative energy 2 years ago and right now, we can see that the expansion and how quickly it takes place. So we're fast movers and we're getting things done, and we'll expand them into new areas where technology is either invented and is cutting edge or is deployed. Now you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, first of all, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to be on this panel this afternoon. They say that the future is unknown, the present is unclear, and the past is changing all the time. It's really hard to say, but I think, from my own observation, I think that the next 10 years or maybe 20 years are going to be dramatic in terms of innovation. It will be a decade of breakthroughs and a pace of change that we never knew before. We're going to break a lot of venues into new areas of our life that we never touched. And I think that innovation is going to be the play in the world. And we're just, in my mind, we're just at the beginning of a major change. And the level of innovation that we will see in the next 10 years will be bigger and more fascinating than the entire level of innovation that we have seen until now. We're really shifting gears and moving into a new era. I believe that for us, continuing to be a startup nation, we need to do several things. First of all, we need to continue and intensify the human capital. At the end of the day, Israel is a small country, and we must make sure that the per capita advantage is being kept all along in terms of education, in terms of inclusiveness. We're a nation of 7.5 million people, but there is a large group of minority that is not participating in the game of technology. This is part of why we set up this fund, which is called Alba Water, which means early signs. It's a partnership, public-private partnership between us and the government, and we believe that, like the high-tech sector in Israel was supported by the newcomers in the 90s, the next decade will be supported by inclusiveness, where we'll have Arabs and Druze and Cherkessians and Bedouins and religious people who did not really participate in the game. And Israel is just crossing now the $30,000 per capita GDP. So when you want to invest in innovation per capita, 2.5 times more than the US, you need also to have the income. So we need to focus on generating income that we can reinvest in technology. We can also not afford ourselves to be in the second line of innovation. We must be in the forefront. And like in a sprint in 100 meters, usually the runners know that they need to start as fast as they can and continue to accelerate until they finish the run. It's a run that has never been finished, and we need to run as fast as possible. There will be new areas that have not been touched until now. For example, if you go into a classroom today, it would look exactly like it looked 100 years ago, which is not applied to electronics, it is not applied to airplanes or cars. But if you go into education, which is the most important portion of our life, technology is out of the classroom, and the kids are bored. The teachers cannot teach anymore. This is something that needs to be changed, and I think in the next decade, education is going to be a big thing. We don't know how our brain operates, and I think that talking about the human capital, we need to intensify the human, and that means human augmentation. And the place where we really need augmentation is our brain. I think there's going to be a lot of research on brain and how the brain works and how that can be implemented in other areas of our life. Of course, we will continue to see the biomedical space. We're going to see energy. We're going to see water. We're going to see a lot of homeland security, mainly in the cyberspace, which is going to be very big. I think we're going to break through the sky and create new technologies for the space. We haven't touched the space yet, and lots of things can be done in that area. So we didn't talk about nanotechnology, which is probably something that crosses all those areas that I just spoke. So I think that if innovation has been evolving in an evolutionary pace until now, this is time for a revolution. And it is very much the last point where we can get our act together, get all the participants in place, and get ready for the race, because it's going to be cruel, it's going to be very fast, and it's not going to look like anything we've seen in the past.
Let me just, as we're switching the microphone, give you a little fact, some facts that illustrate the pace of change that Chemi was talking about. That I got from a website called Socialnomics. The number of years that it took to reach 50 million users, in this case, radio took 38 years, TV took 13 years, Internet took 4 years, the iPod took 3 years, and Facebook has added 100 million users in less than 9 months. The iPhone apps were downloaded at the rate of 1 billion in 9 months. So this just gives you an idea of the accelerating pace of change. Go ahead.
I would like to take another angle of the process, talking about the future of the healthcare in the world and the present in Israel. There are two issues that are concerned for the healthcare system in the world. One of them is the soaring cost of healthcare, and the other one is the aging population. Just to give you a few examples, in the state currently 16% of the GDP goes to healthcare, and still 40 million are not insured. In Europe, it's between 9.5 to 11.5% of the GDP. In Israel, it's 7.8, and the reason for that, there are several reasons, but we have quite a good healthcare system. Aging population. Each of us here has life expectancy is growing by 3 months every year. So we are growing fast and old. By the way, the oldest country in the world is Japan, with 23% of over 60. In Europe, the oldest one is Italy. How we solve it? Something which we have in hand in Israel. Soaring cost is two things: prevention and outpatient. Outpatient in Israel is very common. In the world, it's not so common. And the meaning of going from inpatient to outpatient means technology. And I would like to give an example of a company called Insightec. Insightec is a system, Exablade, which is non-invasive surgical procedure, contradicting definition, but that's what it is. The patient is coming with either ovarian cancer or fibroids or bone cancer, lying down on a bed, going through an MRI system which creates the image of the tissue, and then a focal ultrasound is ablating it. 2 hours later, the patient is waking up. The very next day, he can go to work. Actually, it's she, usually, because the ovarian cancer is she. That's instead of weeks of rehabilitation. And that we have. The meaning is technology, and we have it. The other one is the aging population, or prevention, diagnostics. Today in the world, when you have to do a diagnostics, you have to go to the doctor. That's the first visit. Second, then you send to the diagnostic lab. That's the second visit. Then you go back to the lab to get the results and go back to the doctor for visits. Instead of having office set diagnostic tools. And we have some examples. For example, small company called Spirocore. Instead of going on a treadmill for 10 minutes and going to the place of the treadmill, or you have to sit in the doctor office with your fingers taken some kind of a gadget for 90 seconds, and you have the same result. That's the diagnostic, that's prevention and cost. Something which Orna Berry and myself, which we talked about, is healthcare IT. In Israel, we consider to be one of the leading countries in healthcare IT. And in Israel, the primary healthcare system is using 100% computers. All over the doctors, about 95-98% of the doctors are using computers. In the state, I'll give you to guess, 5%. And the reason for that, that's an old story called the white pill syndrome. And we don't want to spoil a good story with the facts. Saul. Today, the doctor is reimbursed for 15 minutes to see a patient. Now, he will ask, are you sensitive to some of the antibiotics? I say, yes. What it is? I don't know. It's a white pill. So go home and come, give me back. Now, think that he has an EMR, electronic medical record, that is on his table, a computer on his table, and has to dig in 10 gigabytes of data. It won't take him 15 minutes, it will take him more. That's the reason why there's not much of computers on the desks of the doctors. And that's something which can be taken from Israel. Another aging population. I'm, by the way, a very young person. I'm 20 years old with 47 years of experience. So you can guess that I belong to the third generation. And I'm in my prime time. I don't feel anything. So I would like to be at my home and not go to nursing home. It means home care. Home care, which takes care about 4 chronic diseases: the COPD, CHF, which is heart failure, diabetics, and the most popular one is aging. That's also a chronic disease. Once you start it, you never end. And with that home care, you can cut short the visits to the doctors. For example, today CHF, it's cardiac heart failure, isfikat lev. You are sent home after a few weeks in the hospital, and you sit in your home, and all you do is going on the weight. If your weight is growing by 2 or 3 kilos, meaning that your lungs has fluids, and you go to the hospital. But that's sometimes too late. There's a young company called Sensible Medical, which is utilizing, actually they're beating their swords into closure, utilizing military technology. You're putting a radar antenna under your armpit, and it's measuring some parameters of your body, and you are warned ahead of the time that your body is have fluids, too much fluids, and you have to go to doctors. Once again, saving costs, telling aging population and chronic disease. That's what we have already in Israel, and we have about 1,000 companies or more, and we can share it with the industry, with the healthcare system.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. It's a pleasure to be back to the university. I was here about 18 or 20 years ago. So it's nostalgic, if you want. Maybe a word first about Israel and where we are going within the context of the global evolution. I think first that I agree with the notion that the world is becoming more flat, as you mentioned, or as Thomas Friedman says. and it will become more and more competitive. And one of the interesting questions is, what will be the competitive advantage in this new era? And I think, in business school, we learn a lot about, companies developing competitive advantage, built on cost, built on strategy, built on this, built on that. I think the world is becoming more and more a world that you cannot have a sustainable competitive advantage for a long time. Because the pace of innovation is so fast, the real competitive advantage becomes innovation. So being able to innovate faster becomes the core thing on the economic level. And I think that has threats, but also a lot of opportunities for Israel. Because if in the past geography had a very important factor in succeeding as an economy, so in the flat world, Israel is much the center of this world than any other economy. And I think that has many opportunities. Israel specifically, I think, should establish the notion of being innovative, as my colleagues here said, and try to help the country and other industries be innovative. But I think one of the nice things is that we can be innovative and change people's lives all around the world, which is stuff that we do already today. We don't always realize it, but usually Israeli technology touches people, lives around the world and changes it. Whether it's in Netafim, changing the irrigation game and helping farmers in third world countries be able to crop their fields, whether it's technology of Americans from the morning that they wake up and they use their cell phone. It's probably based on chips that were made by Intel here, and they listen to their voicemail, which is probably made by one of the technology companies, Converse, here in Israel. Nice. They switch on the internet and they use this instant messaging that was based on ICQ, etc., etc. So we're doing that already, but I think that the extent that we can become, the innovator to change people's life is just becoming, bigger and bigger, that opportunity. And that's very exciting. I'll say maybe also a few words on, you asked us to kind of try to forecast what's going to happen in our industry. So that was a very difficult question because I was asking myself, what industry is Google in? I don't know. I'm getting confused by that question from day to day. But if I had to put it in one sentence, I would say we're in the industry of solving very big problems via computer science, right? And the reason it's so difficult to break that down to industries is because it turns out that a lot of industries have very, very big problems that could be solved by computer science. So just maybe a few phenomena that we will see going forward and some thoughts around it. One, that Google is a technology company, but it also makes its money in the media business. So I'm often asked about, what's going to happen with digital marketing? Is digital marketing going to become big? Is it going to become small? How pervasive is it going to be? And I say that digital marketing is going to be a word that we're never going to use anymore because that's going to be the only marketing that we will know. And it kind of reminds me how we would used to talk about TVs in the past. Remember, I don't know how many people of that, but quite a few in this audience, and still remember, I hope, a black and white TV. And when no, you say no, I'm sorry. I'll try to explain it. So there was this notion of a black and white TV. And then came, the color TV. And people would say, I have a color TV. I have two color TVs. They would actually, show off and benchmark versus others. But obviously today, no one says I have a color TV, right? Everyone says I just have a TV. So I think that's what's going to happen with digital marketing. We're going to be in a situation where all marketing is digital. It's happening already big time through the phenomena of the internet. but you can see it already creeping on to TV, and we're talking about how TV will connect to the internet, and everything will be connected somehow to the internet. Another notion which I think also Chemi and also Orna mentioned is cloud computing, which I think is going to become a very, very integral part of our life and change our lives in many ways. So let me first kind of say a word about this concept. For me, it's kind of like I don't know how many of you are aware, but in the past we would use electricity. Factories would use electricity in a way that they would actually produce electricity in order to feed their factory with that. Okay. And today it's obvious to all of us that electricity is something that you just put something in the plug and you get electricity. The software industry in many ways is going to become like that. So today we build infrastructure to have software in our factories or in our companies. But it's becoming more and more accessible via just plugging and getting the software from the cloud. That's why it's called cloud computing. And then kind of paying for it as we go, instead of each company building it from the scratch. Now, one of the things that makes it really, really interesting is, all of us have these kind of devices, right, with us today. And the funny thing about these devices is they're becoming computers. This is an Android. I know Chemi wants one, but iPhone. That's a good one as well. So the interesting thing about this, and not specifically to Android, but this is the whole industry of smartphones, and it's important. I have another friend here with BlackBerry, so here you have it. We have the whole different series. But when you think about this thing and you connect this to the cloud, okay, so these are PCs connected to the internet, connected to the cloud. It turns out that each one of us has a power in his hand, which is more than a superpower computer just a decade ago. And with this kind of power, you could solve really, really big problems. So just one problem I want to give you an example for is, Google is a lot about connecting people with information. And one of the barriers of people in information is language, because we all speak different languages, and we still didn't solve that problem. Turns out that now, with the ability of connecting this to the cloud and to superpower computers, you can solve that on the go. So if you go today, you can get pretty good, if you go into YouTube today, watch a movie, you can see already that movie online in real time, being translated almost to every language in this world, okay? And it's pretty good. It's maybe not 100%, but it's definitely 90%. And I've tried it with different languages, and you know what? Check it out. It works. And we're very close to taking it to the next step, where you can speak on your phone and speak Hebrew, and the other guy from the other side can hear it in Japanese, Chinese, whatever you want. So this notion of language being a barrier between people is going to disappear. And it's going to disappear because of this phenomenon of cloud computing. Maybe last is, the internet started as a closed garden. And you remember the ISPs and AOL, and it was all closed gardens, and then it was opened up. And when it was opened up, a burst of innovation came out. And a lot of Israeli startups, of course, us Israelis being very entrepreneurial, very innovative, took advantage of that. So now we're going into the world where the same thing is happening in the mobile space, where it's basically today still kind of closed gardens. Developers can't really develop applications for this world because they're limited to a specific operator or to a specific device with a lot of different standards, so they can't scale. But now when it's becoming open, and it's becoming like a PC, basically it's an open realm, it's a new world where developers are going to compete and innovate. And guess what? Israel is very highly positioned. Israeli startups, entrepreneurs, even independent people, very highly positioned to be able to develop those applications, whether it is for Chemi's phone, or for my phone, or for Tal's phone. So basically a lot of different exciting stuff coming up in our lives. And I think that if we will make the right choices, Israel can be a center, it can be a key game player in this.
Try this. Yeah, this is good. Saul, thanks for putting me after Meir. It's going to be disappointing.
Oh, you can do it.
Okay. All right, so it's been a while. I'll remind you of the question, what happens next? The entrepreneurial answer, Saul, I think is whatever we make happen next. And answering that from an Israeli perspective, I think we have to look at the tools that we have at our disposal to make things happen, make big things happen. We like to talk about the fact that we have no natural resources and very few unnatural resources as well. And we have gas now, but no water, no oil, not much land, no cheap labor force. We really can't compete with the leaders in the world that compete on those bases. What we do have is I think, a very unique concentration of minds, and we've kind of gotten by on our wits in Israel in pretty much any industry or almost any area of human undertaking since we got here. And beyond that concentration, we have a lot of experience in a lot of different areas that was garnered mainly overseas and has come back to Israel. Now, if we'd been sitting in this room 20 years ago, I would have been, and I'd been invited, I would have been giving you the setup for what was to become the Israeli technology miracle. Essentially, we would have been sitting here, and I think most people would have been looking at me cockeyed if I had said that within 8 years, we would have gone from virtually zero to NASDAQ leadership ex the United States, essentially becoming a technology superpower from a standing start in 8 years. Shocking story. I think it's shocking in retrospect. It would have been almost impossible to believe in 1990, not so long ago. Today, it's 2010, and I'll make the same case for financial services. In fact, it's exactly the same case. I don't think you have to switch out any words in kind of my setup for what was to become the technology miracle in Israel for what I think will happen in financial services, and that's what our firm does. So I hope I'm right. But essentially, we have a concentration of unique minds. We have thousands of the top professionals in our space. We operate, KCPS operates in the investment management kind of subsector of financial services, but I think this is true of a lot of other sectors as well. Literally thousands of the best minds in our industry, people who come with 10, 15, 20 years of experience from around the world. We happen to be the Jewish country, and we happen to be pretty well represented in that industry, and I think that's been a factor, and in fact it's an advantage that we have over technology. No offense, guys. But that I think should take us forward very significantly in that industry. The reason I don't think that's developed to date in Israel is we had a de facto hostile regulatory environment for money managers in Israel, and that all changed in 2005 and really unlocked massive potential. I don't want to make a pitch for KCPS, but just as an example of what's going on in the industry, and I see at least 2 people in the audience who are in the same business and have been doing very well in this business for a number of years. And we've been quiet, I think, for a while. At least you guys have. And a lot of the firms that are operating in Israel have been using that to their advantage to snap up professionals, mainly from London. U.S. I know there are a lot of Americans here. Unfortunately, we pay taxes no matter where we live in the United States. But everybody else can come to Israel and for a productive period of their lives pay essentially no taxes, and that's really created an influx of really some of the top people of our industry to Israel. So when I look out over the next 5 or 10 years, you probably don't hear a lot about it today, but I think you will 5 years from now. What's next? Financial services in Israel.
Great. This has been a great run. Okay, so we're going to do another round, and we'll have to make it a bit, the answers a bit shorter. This is good that we did long answers to get a lot of meat out quickly. But the second question we've sort of started to deal with to some degree, which is what are the challenges ahead for Israel? And we've started to deal with this, and I'm going to throw out something based on some of the things that have been said here. For instance, when we talk about challenges, often a lot of the discussion centers around education. And in fact, in the book, we have a chapter on threats that deals mostly with that issue. And Chemi addressed it to some degree. It's a huge challenge, but it's not the only challenge in terms of the challenges facing Israel. And in addition to what you might want to say about education, I'd be interested in hearing some other types of challenges that you think face us as the startup nation. And to throw out one of them that came up is talking about how to innovate faster. Do we need to innovate the way we innovate? In other words, do we have to figure out a faster, better way to innovate? Are we doing that? Does Israel innovate differently than other countries already? Or is it just because we have more startups here, or is it because each of those startups is doing something differently than other places? That's something we didn't really get into in the book. I'd be curious what you think about that. So let's start that round. Go ahead. That's yours.
Okay, manners are an Israeli trait, so so you should notice that there are some genes that cannot be erased in Chemi's good behavior. Thank you, Chemi. Okay, first of all, I hinted to the fact that we innovate differently because we don't innovate bottom-up by tracing everything that needs to be done. We innovate bottom-down. And top-down, sorry, bottom-down. Erase the previous sentence. I didn't say it, and I will never admit to it, even if you recorded it. In any case, the top-down approach means that you don't look at the details and you know what you need to do. And I mentioned in the previous part when I said that one strongest property of Israelis is the get-it-done approach. And if you know what you're being asked to do, and you do that under the constraints that are prescribed. And this is unique and different because we don't try to state what are the real requirements. We're the land of improvisation. And land of improvisation is not a joke. Many times under suboptimal conditions, we get to optimal results. And so long as we can do that, because our brains are functioning, we are committed, our teams are strong, we're committed to the national results and benefit from our success, we'll do it. And this is something I spent 10 years in the States, even if I don't speak English yet, but I work there as well, and in very good places. And I have to say that working in Israel keeps you on your toes forever. Sometimes I don't go to bed because I can't flex my feet because I'm still on my toes at night. So it is like that. And I think this is very important. And when I look forward, Chemi mentioned the fund that he chairs that goes into the minorities section, which is a very important activity because we have 20% minorities who have 7% share of the GDP, and believe me, I worked with many, and they have the competences to be equally productive citizens. But that's not the only part that I think should evolve. I mentioned earlier other segments. I will not repeat that. I will mention also periphery. And periphery, working in Be'er Sheva, there is a great university there, but working in Be'er Sheva for somebody who lives, I don't look. I'm hosting a delegation from Australia in a week. Very strong delegation, and they have equal time in all the universities. And this is not because I'm politically correct, you know I'm not. I don't have your good manners. But it is because I believe that we have in each one of the universities fantastic qualities. And the University of the Negev, for me, is pioneering and is also addressing a different segment of the population in terms of education. So for me, it's a very important exercise. And don't joke on me right now because we don't have time. What I want to say is that we need to address the quality of life in terms of the level of education and employment by different sectors, sexes, religions, geographic locations, all of the above. And this is something that needs to be done by entrepreneurs like us and by the government in terms of regulations. So there is where to go forward in terms of enhancing Israel, doing productive work in additional sectors and geographies. And I will not elaborate further because I can, since I've thought about it before, I can give a more detailed description of how it should be done and what exactly should be done, but we'll keep it to a later independent conversation. So now it's your turn, my friend.
Okay, there are lots of challenges, and we don't have enough time to talk about all the challenges, so I'll try to address maybe just 2 points that can describe the challenges that I can see for the next 10 years. And I'm not talking about the competition that is arising all over the world in terms of innovation, but I would like to talk about the role of the society and what we do with our future, because this is our biggest challenge. I think we understand what we need to do, and the biggest challenge is can we act on what we know we need to act? That's the biggest challenge. I heard once in one of the conferences, Larry Summers, who's a very smart man, there was a session that people were asked to speak for 3 minutes to say what is the most important thing in their life. And he was at the time the head of Harvard University, and he said that the biggest challenge that he has as an educator is to make sure that the students and the people in the world are doing exactly what they know they should do. And he gave a very simple example. He said people know that smoking is dangerous, but still they smoke. They don't do what they know they should do. The problem with us is that we live in an isolated country, and even though the world is flat, and I read the book and admire the book and the things that are said there, still it's not a smooth world. There are lots of obstacles and a lot of barriers, and I think what Meir said about the cloud computing and how it's going to bridge the gaps, that can help Israel a lot. It can help the barrier of language, the barrier of culture, the barrier of difference. What we see in the technology sector is that we always lag behind the world. When in the US people are starting to invest in energy, it takes us time to understand that this becomes a big issue. And when the VC community starts to invest in energy, the US VC community is already almost done with investing. So we have a shift, a delay in time, catching up and understanding where the world is moving, because we are not in the heart of the world. We are remote from the heart of the world. And the same happens with the amplitude. When things are happening on a large scale in the US, it starts to pick up in Israel with a time shift and a delay. And as time goes by, the rate of changes and innovation is increasing. Those delays are becoming very significant. So we have these two trends. On one hand, technology closes the gaps that we have. On the other hand, the pace is increasing, and those delays and shifts are becoming much more important than they were. The bottom line is, how do we keep in the center of innovation? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, Israel was very innovative, and it had a lot of innovation coming from things that are not going to be relevant for the new technologies and the new horizons. I'm talking mainly about sourcing innovation from military. Those things are not going to be applied to the new technologies and the new challenges that we have. So my solution, my advice in how do we handle it is, I think we need to become not only a nation of innovators, not only a startup nation, but a nation that implements innovation, consumes innovation, and therefore understands what are the future needs. Today, if you want to develop something in the internet, you need to look at the US. If you want to develop a product for cellular networks, you need to look at China. And those areas are setting the tone, and they are setting the usage, and they are setting the behavior of the consumer. And being in a small country, we are still far away from the consumers. Most of the Israeli high-tech companies are servicing other companies that are servicing the end user. We need to shortcut, and we need to touch innovation with our own hands. It relates to what I spoke with Dan and Saul about Israel becoming a place to solve problems, to become a beta site of the world. This is where we need to go next. We need to become the beta site of the world for innovation, not only for creating innovation, but also for implementing innovation and using innovation. We can be the first country, as Saul said, to drive on gasoline-free cars. We could have been the first country that would have been wirelessly connected. We could be the first country to have computers and technology in every classroom. Because we're small, we need to leverage the fact that we're small and innovators and be ahead of the curve. If we manage to do that, I think Israel has a very bright future, and I think that at the end of the day, it is in our own hands.
I have, just before I'm going to the serious part of my talk, I would like to comment on two things. First of all, improvisation. We have brought it up to a level of an art, because all over the world we are relying on miracles. In Israel, we are planning on them. And if we are talking about difference, I would like to take you to a small tour in Medica, which is the biggest exhibition of medical devices, 4,400 exhibitors and 140,000 visitors. You come to the Indian or the Chinese national pavilion with 40 or 60 companies. All of them use the same product, oxidation of blood, different colors, different prices, but the same product. You come to the national pavilion of Israel, you will find 40 companies. None is similar. All of them are different. And all of them are technology. By the way, that's the reason why Israel it's a full house, the exhibition, but Israel is gaining more and more territory there because the exhibition manager likes the technology that Israel is bringing. Now to this other part. The challenge is to build Orbotech and NICE and whatever companies, big companies in Israel. We don't have in life science, beside Teva, which is more a chemical company than a life science company, we don't have any big companies. All of them are small, between 5 to 10 people. And I can tell you that this industry is employing about 35 to 37,000 employees, and last year generated $6.4 billion. Out of that, only 5,000 are working in the 1,000, and the rest are working in either Teva or in other 50 big companies. Now we need to build more sustainable, more bigger companies in Israel. And that's a dream that I have sometimes. Another thing is the geography. Today, the life science expert is actually sales and expert is the same because Israel is a very small market. 72% of that goes to the state, because everybody wants to be a millionaire overnight, but it's not that. And 23% goes to Europe and 5% goes to the East. Now, the state is a standstill today because of the new bill. Nobody knows, new health bill of Obama. Nobody knows where it will go, and the reimbursement issue will be a problem. Europe has his own problem, economical problem. So another challenge is how to convince the industry to go to India, China, Japan, and Korea, where they are investing in healthcare, is growing about 18 to 20% a year. That's another challenge. The third challenge is the story of a drug. Professor Ruth Arnon has started her research on the Copaxone, on multisclerosis actually, in '69. The first drug was sold in '96. It took 27 years to do that. Now, Teva took over the drug in '76. And how you know that in 20 years it will become a blockbuster? And it became. That's a challenge to the whole industry to understand how what I'm starting now will be a blockbuster 20 or 30 years down the road. And that's the whole story about the process. Today you are starting with a burning mind of a professor in the university, and it will take about 6 to 7 years until it will come to the technology transfer organization, which we have about 16 of them. And all of them are under one roof. You can find about 1,600 different patents or projects which are waiting for somebody to pick up. Over 1,000 of them are in life science. And then you go to the chief scientist, you get the grant or the standing alone, you go to technology incubator, and then you come to a valley of death. For 2 or 3 years on medical devices, for 6 or 7 years for the bio and pharmaceutical. How we get this? I know there is a program, the government, I hate to say about our government doing the right thing, but sometimes I have. And today there is a program called 2028, which is talking about how the Israeli industry will be in 2028. And that's one of the gaps that has to be covered, this valley of death. Last but not least, just to give you an understanding what the funds will require. The second drug that you buy will cost, manufacturing will cost about $100, okay? The first one costs $1.7 billion. How you do that? And Israel is investing a lot in R&D, 4.7% of our GDP, first to anybody else, even not per capita. By the way, I had a Chinese guest of mine that I've started to talk about patent per capita and told me, don't tell me about capita because per capita you will be the first all the time. But innovation, we have the innovation. And for example, medical devices, we are number 4, absolute numbers, not per capita in patents in the world. In molecules, either large or small, we are number 12 in the world. And I'm not talking about number of Nobel Prizes. The challenge is how to bridge this gap of 27 years.
So as you can see, when it comes to challenges, we can just go on and on and on. And we always feel we're just at the beginning. So one challenge that I think relates to what David was talking about. When I think about Israel, first of all, on the macro level, I always worry we're a bit short-term sighted. Let's say it in a nice way. Do you agree with how many agree with that Israelis are a bit short-term sighted? Okay, that's
Short-sighted.
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 Right. Yeah, that was you didn't see yourselves, but that was pretty much everyone. Now look, I do have sympathy for that, right? Because if we look at our history, for a long time, and maybe even today, we're under the assumption, we were growing in a context of existential threats, if you want. And this is true since we've since we founded this country. And when you're living in under existential threats, you're thinking short term, right? I can understand that, but I think we need to grow, and it's time for us to mature, because I worry that where we need to go in order to execute on innovation will require us to have much more longer-term thinking, strategic planning, and long-term execution, consistency. All these words, they're absent from the Hebrew language. Consistency, accountability, they just don't exist. Accountability, anyone has an idea for accountability in Hebrew? No.
And Google it.
Yeah, Google it. You won't find it in Hebrew. So that really worries me. And I know we usually, first of all, come and complain about the government, and there's obviously a governance issue, and we lack long-term planning and execution on that side. But I always like to look, first of all, at us, at ourselves. Before we complain about the government, etc., let's talk about the private sector. And, we talked about the fact that we're super innovative. We hold a lot of records when it comes to startups. And I want to say it's a great thing, because there's this big debate that you always hear in Israel. Should we have startup? Should it continue to be a startup nation? Or should we build more, Tevas, big companies, Amdocs, Checkpoint, etc., etc.? And I think that already the question is wrong, because it's not should we do this or that. We should do this and that. So what I want to say is the whole startup culture and the whole innovative entrepreneurial culture is a great thing, and we need to continue it, and we should never compromise it. But at the same time, I think, if that was Israel 1.0, Israel 2.0 should also be an economy and a country that supports and enables those other types of companies. And for that, we have to establish more commitment, more consistency, more ability to plan for the long term. I think that in terms of innovation, we need to move from the phase of being innovative, but then being quickly bought, and then having the company buy us capture a lot of the value that is still left on the table, and to be able to build leadership in innovation. So leadership in innovation, for example, is Iskar, yeah? They're not necessarily the biggest company in the world, but they're still definitely the leaders. Buffett bought Iskar because they are the leaders in their field. They are the leaders in innovation in their field. So it doesn't have to be, 100 million, 100,000 employee company, but it should be leader in innovation, and not a compromise on, just doing the classic Israeli super brilliant idea and then building it out elsewhere and then leaving a lot of that value. So I think that's definitely one of the things is this long term. Another thing I won't dwell on, but I always worry about our ability to market ourselves or PR ourselves. Actually, we have an extraordinary ability to do it badly. And I think that when we don't do it at all, it's probably better than when we try to do it. I loved your book. I read it and I loved it, and I highly recommend everyone to read this book. It was not surprising to me at all that this book was not written by Israelis, right? Because they can't think about it. There's, like Orna says, they're so occupied doing it that they don't have the time to look and talk about it and tell the world the story, etc. So that's another thing that I think in order to become and in order to build big companies, we have to learn how to market ourselves better. We're getting better with it as more Israelis are exposed to global companies and they travel abroad, they come back to Israel, like Tal, like many others. I think we're building that slowly. And many more, but let's cut it short.
I'll just continue with Meir's and David's point. How do we get big? How do we get from being a bunch of startups that get sold at the first opportunity? And I'm definitely not including everybody in that, to having a lot more major firms with staying power in Israel. I think branding is a huge thing. It's a huge deal. I don't think we realize it's not just the missing link for making the next step. It's a threat for losing everything that we've built so far. I mean, if you spend any significant time looking at how we're perceived in the world today as Israel, this is a real threat. By the way, it's something we can all do something about. I hope you don't think I'm presumptuous, but I'm going to say something at the end. What we can all do to help in that. That's the branding thing. By the way, and a kind of interesting side benefit, if we can eventually make peace, that opens up some major markets that are right here. And by the way, a number of firms in Israel are serving those markets today in a quiet way with their own little interesting branding and marketing efforts, and the potential is enormous. I think the only one who loses from that is Better Place, Chemi, right? Because you could drive out of the country. Why would you buy a car that you can't? But I'll talk about one other thing, and this we could really do something about, is I think behavioral standards. I think most people look at this as an education issue. I think it's an example-setting issue. We're very much guerrilla warfare, short-term thinking. Totally agree with that. Kind of classic example, a lot of people in the audience, it seems, grew up in other places. You ring for an elevator, okay? Or in Belgium or in the United States, wherever you live. Doors open, and there are people inside waiting to get out. Okay, what's the standard? Right? Standard is people come out before you go in. That's kind of the standard. And when you're inside, you understand you've got the right of way. Here, that doesn't work. Here, door opens, traffic jam. I go through it every single morning. My building has, unfortunately, a lot of floors, and every single morning there's that traffic jam at the elevator. It drives me crazy. Now, look, there's certainly advantages to that. We're aggressive. We're out of the box. We know how to take advantage of, of situations, or I was going to say of others, but that's not fair. But situations. But I think being able to kind of subscribe to a common set of standards without losing our ability to innovate, and I think that works. I think that's possible. I think there are a lot of examples of that in Israel. By the way, the Air Force, Chemi, tell me if you disagree with me, I think the Air Force is a fantastic example of that. It's the kind of the ability to stay, trying to think of the English there, mamzer, but operate within a framework and according to a set of rules and standards, and understand when it's appropriate to break them, and when it's appropriate, the 99% of the time when it's not appropriate to break those things. I think this is a huge policy issue that we need to tackle on the government level. That's, I think, a bigger and maybe more pessimistic thing. But I think we can all really contribute to this just by setting an example and making a point of setting an example and reminding oneself every day. And it's those little things that I really think they impact everything that we're talking about here. It's the way you drive. It's the way you speak to other people. It's the way you behave in public. I think that makes a very, very big difference. And the fact that people do go overseas and mingle in other places and come back here and bring back those standards, I think is a key piece. On the government side, just a quickie, the tax law, I'm a big supporter of this tax rule, even though it doesn't help me at all. This tax rule also applies, by the way, to returning Israelis, which I think is a great thing. We talk about the brain drain in Israel. Saul, I think you guys even talk about it in the book. One of the great features of the Israeli brain drain, unlike the brain drain from Greece or whatever, or another country, is it tends to be a revolving door. Israelis go out, but they tend to come back, or a lot of them do. And I think that's a fantastic feature of Israel. The fact that we have this immigrant society is great. There's a ton of power in that. But sending people abroad for a period to kind of get not just professional but cultural and standards exposure is a very big deal. And I'll leave it at that.
Great. So we've had two excellent rounds. And now we want to open it for questions. And we've got an incredible panel here, incredible amount of expertise to tap into. Yeah. go ahead. Yeah.
I'm a visitor to the country. My daughter just made Aliyah. And I travel a lot in all the airports that I go to. In Addis Ababa, in Istanbul, in Frankfurt. I meet up with people that we have been hiring to develop projects in developing countries from Israel. There's human capital here with experience in many fields outside of high tech. And the challenge to organize and to promote that expertise in places where previous generation technology is like breakthrough technology. So we don't do enough here to use our previous generation technology to actually improve our relationships with 50 countries in Africa, places in Southeast Asia that are actually welcoming us and want us, and we're not there because we're not organized.
So let's say, yeah.
There is an opportunity to actually organize that sector and to do something other than innovate, but innovate in terms of penetrating markets that otherwise are hostile.
Okay, so let's do this so that we get the most number of questions. That we'll try to have usually one person answer the question. In this case, basically, how can or how should Israel be using its technology, not necessarily high tech, but its human capital, particularly in the developing world?
I think that it's not only in the developing world. It's we did not talk about other than high-tech industries here, but I think that there can be other industries. Iskar is a great example. I think that there should be a few more that are using technicians and applied engineers, for example, which are not utilized, say, when they leave the army. So I take Victor's point as a correct one, and I think that efforts need to be made in part in policy and part by entrepreneurs here.
Okay, another question. Yeah, go ahead.
Victor, actually you're barging into an open door. I would like to challenge you to meet me in 2-3 years, because I'm involved right now in something like that, trying to imitate the agriculture trainer that we have sent to Africa with the high-tech trainer. You'll never build this business in 1 year.
Go ahead.
My name is Yoel Israel. My question is for Tal, or maybe if anyone else can answer. I speak to many Israelis, and I talk about the high-tech industry, and particularly the lack of that they're not heavily regulated, and there aren't a lot of taxes. And I say about spreading it to other industries, particularly the financial industry, because I have a passion for finance. And like you mentioned, there's resentment towards the high-tech. And instead of saying, yeah, that's a good idea, even from people that are well-versed with the different industries, they say, well, if anything, we should tax and regulate more, get some money from the high-tech. What do you think we can do to get the politicians and also everyday Israelis to challenge the status quo of high taxes and high regulation?
Yeah. First of all, the total tax rate in Israel is not that high. It's not that high. If you look at across the developed world, 2010, it's already not that high. I'm going to venture a guess that if you look at the developed world in 2012, it's going to actually look pretty low. We are entering a fiscal crisis of unprecedented proportions across the Western world. It includes the United States. We're already seeing what's happening across Europe. Japan is a nuclear bomb that is going to go off at some point. So taxes, I think we're actually going to look pretty good in Israel on the tax side. We're actually we're in terrible fiscal shape, but we're in relatively great fiscal shape, Kenny, when you look at the world right now. I do agree, though, that the idea of incentive programs to get industries off the ground is probably a good thing. We had it in technology. We definitely did. Technology, enjoyed an unfair advantage over the strategic industry for a number of years. By the way, there's still certain tax advantages to venture funds in Israel. that I think are probably doing good in general for the industry. Maybe those should be expanded to other industries. That's a very political question that you're asking, though, because the question is who gets the break, who's. And there are definitely a lot of lobbying efforts going on right now. But tax isn't the only incentivizer. I would say, though, I sound like a spokesman for the finance ministry, but this tax rule from 2008 is going to be good for everybody at the end of the day. It's basically encouraging, industrious Jews from around the world and Israelis who've been living overseas. I think it's for more than 7 years. To come to Israel and be productive, no matter what the industry is. If you're into finance, I mean, there's really a lot going on, a lot more than people realize. If you want to stop by after the panel, I can kind of point you maybe in a few directions. So, all right.
Yeah.
Saul, in your book, there's very little mention of women and their place in the startup nation. In this panel, we have 1 in 6 panelists as a woman. Look around the audience, it seems like the majority are men, at least from where I'm sitting. What is the place of women in this startup nation?
Underrepresented. Yeah. We didn't really look into it, and I'm not sure. I kind of have this feeling that it's that the situation in Israel might be a little better than in other places, but probably not much. That it's a kind of an overall tech phenomenon of women being underrepresented. There are plenty of counterexamples. I know plenty of women in tech. And particularly in the biotech sector, and maybe Orna, you could say something about that. I think there's partly some structural problems with it, structural bases to it, in the sense that the kind of military networks that have been very important for Israel have worked to the disadvantage of women, of Arabs, of different groups. That it's kind of, that's the upside. The upside is the kind of network. The downside is the people who are outside the network. But there are ways you can get around that. Women obviously in universities like this one, or in the Technion, or the same with the Arab sector. I mean, if you go to the Technion, or you're in the right programs here like the MBA school and so on, and you want to be in high tech, you'll be there. I mean, there's nothing stopping you. But it is an issue now in terms of underrepresentation. Anybody, you want to comment?
My
5 men to balance.
I won't go into depth because obviously this requires a little bit of explaining and a little bit of planning. But I suggest that you have a look at a publication called Women in Research, WIR. Space EU for the European Union. I was part of this research. It was not only run by women, it was men and women, and surveyed many companies. There are issues about best practices, some of them mentioned by Saul, and other are required for people to progress within companies, and consequently certainly were deficient in the number of women who have a sustained career in the technology sector. It requires major compromises, not in the sense of not being married or in the sense of not having children, but in the sense of managing your time and doing what you want to do on the personal level and on the professional level. So have a look at that. It's a major issue. The proportions today are still not becoming, but it's not specific to Israel. Israel, I think, within the advanced countries, is doing better because of the fact that certain women are determined to have a professional career, regardless of the fact that they also want to be to parent. And that's a problem that probably you will have to face in the future as well, because if you want to have a career and you want to have a leadership position, you will have to compromise on the number of hours, for example, that you can spend at home. But it's so you can go through it. I have 3 kids. I have 4 grandchildren. I've given priority to my children over work when they needed it badly. But seriously, on the regular day, in the middle of the week, nobody would see me at home in an early hour. That's obvious. Otherwise, I would have not been here. But I'm saying that it is an issue. The practices, the best practices of employers, and the ability to negotiate for women, some because of their networks and some because of their self-confidence and education from home, are not yet providing the infrastructure for women to exploit themselves in the best way professionally. That's clear.
I would like to say that in the biotechnology and pharmaceutical subsectors, most of the most successful managers are women. And I don't think it's an issue in pharmaceutical.
Yeah, my name is Benji Meir. I made Aliyah from Los Angeles 26 years ago, and I work at Beit Izi Shapiro in Ra'anana. I was curious to hear about the idea of Israel as a startup nation in the nonprofit sector. We've heard about the private and the public, and how we can think maybe the innovation in these kind of areas that we've talked about can also have their impact or their relationship and responsibility in the nonprofit sector. Thanks.
Look, it's not uniform, but there are many people with great convictions who do a lot for the non-profit sector. And I think, at least I know some of Chemi's activities and some of my activities. I can tell you that over 30% of my time on a regular basis is work for non-profit organizations. And we have to do that because there are many issues that require tolerance from the society, and it's not enough that the regulator will say this is important. So there are many of us who do that. Some of us do it more, some of us do it on top and do it hence less, but it is coming into the societal ethics, the understanding that it is the responsibility of those who succeed to make sure that those who have disadvantages get better place in society.
Yeah, I would just add to that it's not just a matter of high-tech engaging in nonprofits, but of the same kind of energies that are producing startups are producing incredible things in the social what I call social entrepreneurship sector. And I almost would want to write a whole other book about it. I mean, because I think we didn't deal with it enough in Startup Nation, because it's an incredible story that's waiting to be told. And the same creative energies you're seeing and just incredible stories throughout the country. You, and then you're next.
Hi, my name is Ariel, and I have a question. If you read the news, they've been talking about Russians lately, how they do not want to open their own businesses, and they have the education, especially in science. How do we get them to say, start a business and we'll back you? How do we deal with the Russian population? They have the education, but they don't want to take the risk. How do we help that population? Because that's a population that has the education and might have the answers to problems we have in Israel, but they're not willing to take the risk. How do we help them to take the business risk, to start their own businesses? Because it's a big population with the education, maybe tools we need. So how do we deal with this population specifically?
I don't know. Do you share the perception that Russians are underrepresented as maybe as the lead entrepreneurs, but the Russians are very well represented in high tech generally?
I think they are well represented in companies, including in entrepreneurs' positions, many times not as CEOs, but as key entrepreneurs. And there was a concerted effort with the incubators that were really established in order to address the difference in culture between applying science and technology in the private sector and having the communist way of working. And since 92 and until today, there is a fairly high incidence of entrepreneurs who come from the former Soviet Union and who are entrepreneurs in incubators. Often when they get out of the incubator, they take professional managers in. But the numbers are immense, and rightfully so, because they are also occupying many of the science and technology departments today, the second generation. They are quite impressive.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Anna Kingsley. This question is probably directed at you, Saul, but any of you feel free to answer it. Saul, forgive me if you've covered this in your book. I've bought it tonight, I haven't read it yet. I'm a marketing specialist, and I specialise in Israel in marketing Israeli companies abroad. And one of the things that, as we all know in life, it's not just about what you know, it's about who you know. And I spend a lot of time educating Israelis that actually, when you're in the non-Jewish world in England, it's not just, oh yeah, I'll ring my mate's brothers, dogs, cats, aunts, uncle, and I'll get you the gig. What do you feel the sort of, what we call in England, the Jewish mafia has contributed to making Israel the startup nation? I mean, do you feel that, the facts of this collective intelligence, I'm going to get together with Paul Cohen, who's going to get together with blah, blah, has sort of made it work?
Yeah. There's the fact that Israel has a diaspora network to tap into has certainly been very important for Israel. In a way, Tal was talking about that in his remarks. It has been an important factor. It is an important factor, not just the kind of within Israel network, but the one, if you will, Jewish network in the world. It's not the main explanation. It certainly helped. I mean, I think, for instance, in terms of how Israeli companies got started on NASDAQ, there were American Jews who were critical to that process, to just getting those first IPOs and so on, and breaking through. And of course, the story of Israel as the startup nation. I mean, Israel itself is a startup. And that's also a story of the diaspora contributing in so many ways to the creation of Israel. So it's been an important part. It's not something that's unique to Israel. I think other communities also have diasporas that help people in their home country. And I think that what Tal was talking about in terms of that brain drain isn't always one direction. The World Bank actually talks about something called brain circulation, where they give it a name, that people going back and forth. And that's, you mentioned marketing. Israelis, like has been said here, are not particularly good at marketing. And the fact that Israelis have been going to the U.S. and other countries and learning about management, learning about standards, learning about marketing, learning about all the things that we're less good at, it's very, very important process for Israel. So that's the answer. Yeah, why don't you go ahead? Do you have the mic? Okay, great.
I'm the only Indian student here at the... I'm all the way from India and... I wanted to quickly say that I got tremendously touched by resolve in myself that when I go back to India, I become ambassador. I become international ambassador. My question is, does your wonderful country, this wonderful country, has a policy to attract international students like us? Yes, we do. But as an education policy, do we have, like, when I was shooting the countries, US, UK, they have these policies where they're attracting. Do we have it as of now?
It's still beginning, and it exists in MBA programs in various forms, but it is now starting in other professions as well, and there are classes run in English, like civil engineering in Haifa, others in the interdisciplinary center, Tel Aviv University. They are opening Jerusalem, the Hebrew University. Ben Gurion has an MBA program that is run in English. It's becoming more because it's very, very clear that for globalization purposes, we want you and your peers to come over. And thank you for the warm words.
Oh.
One relevant point on that is, I'm going back to my point on standards. A guy called Eliezer Ben Yehuda, right, revived this ancient language of Hebrew, which had a wonderful kind of cohesive effect and reminded us of our bond to this specific land, but also had the effect of really cutting us off from the world culturally and economically and in a lot of different ways. And we had that bridge to cross. You know, I was just thinking, I don't know why I was thinking about this, but there's an Israeli anchor woman talking about women in businesses like Yonit Levy. Really fantastic, very well read, very quick and everything. She's Israeli Zayn Verji, okay? Why is Zayn Verji good enough for CNN and Yonit Levy is not? It's the English. And that's a barrier in every single industry. It's true in technology. It's true in our business. That's been a big issue, and it's true in the university system. I think that's the number one barrier. The Technion is one of the leading institutions in the world for sciences and technologies. The reason we don't attract a majority non-Israeli crowd is because we're taught in Hebrew. I don't know exactly if there's a good answer to that question. How do we get past it? But I think that's issue number one.
Yeah, go ahead.
My name is David. This is slightly touched upon, but a lot of the startups that have come out of here are based out of particular units in the Army, which have served as incubators for taking military technology and applying it to the civil sector. If you look 20 years in the future, a lot of people theorize that high tech is no longer based on silicon devices, but we're going to smart materials and things that are not necessarily military or direct military technology today. So I'm wondering if there is any investment or thought as to how you make an incubator akin to the IDF, these units where people get paid 250 shekels a month to do work that's worth significantly more in the long haul for modern technologies that will be in the future.
Yeah, I'll just say something about that, in that we talk a lot in the book about the importance of military culture to Israel, and I get the question from time to time, what happens if there's peace? I mean, is that a problem for Israel? And it's a serious question, not so much in that what happens if there's peace, but it's a serious question because we're obviously not suggesting that the entire world draft everybody in order to become entrepreneurial. We're not recommending that societies militarize themselves in order to do startups, and we're not recommending it even for Israel. And so I think a big challenge, going back to the challenges for a society, is how do you get the kind of framework, the skills, the leadership, the teamwork, the improvisation, the willingness to sacrifice, all these things we think are very important cultural things that have come from the military, that are different experience that you get in academia and different than you get in business. And the fact that Israelis have this third category that often makes them more mature, gives them different skills that are very important for business. How do you get all that outside the military? And I think the key, and this is a problem, God willing, this will be a problem for us someday. And it's already a problem for other countries. And I think the key word is to look at the words military service and and look at the second word, service. You can imagine that frameworks, different kinds of service frameworks, volunteering, national service, community service, any kind of service, teaches you that there's something more important than yourself to work for in the world. I think that's a very important value for business and for life. And all these other values that you get in the military. And I think we need to do, and actually what's interesting is this is already happening in Israel to some degree, in that you have these mechinot, these programs that are propping up like crazy for a year between the end of high school and the beginning of the Army. And it's exactly what these programs are doing, is they're trying to kind of give you a quick dose of maturity and experience and service and all these things so that you're ready to go in the Army. And maybe that kind of mechinot concept could be expanded, civilian framework for getting these kinds of things outside the military, and maybe other countries can help figure this out. And a last question, and we'll...
You have asked 4 letters, 4 words. I answer you with 3 words. There's triple F, an early stage. It's friend, family, and fools.
Okay. Friends, family, and...
That means
fools.
early, that means angel investors should back very early stage companies, if I understood right.
Hi, my name is Yolan Chechik. I'm a student at the IMBA program. My question is about patriotism. So the fact that you are Israelis, how does it affect your judgment as a manager of international companies? For example, Mr. Brand, if now Google headquarters ask you or advise you to open a new research company or division, either India or Israel, and you know it's going to be pretty much cheaper in India, how would it affect your decision that you're Israeli, that by opening the center in Israel will help Israel?
At least maybe I'll say a word. First of all, our friend here from India, I admire your country, and I'm very happy to see that you are here. My response would be open a research center in India and open one in Israel, and maybe this time in Nazareth.
But does it affect your judgment in Israel?
We are not, we are not objective 100%. But I think that at the end of the day, it's not a question of either or. It's a question of this and that. And I welcome competition. I don't try to block competition. But for example, if Google or any other company has to decide if they increase the number of employees, they add more. For example, I had a call and I had a discussion with one of the large U.S. corporations that is active in Israel, and the guy called me and he said, we are going to, we have few hundreds of employees in Israel. The headquarters has decided, instead of increasing the number of employees in Israel, to go and do it in other countries, not necessarily India, but other places. So for sure he would fight in order to get jobs in Israel. It's not on the account of the others, but as a patriot, I would fight not to be overruled by other countries. And I think today Israel has an opportunity to present this kind of work in Nazareth and in the Arab sector and also in other minorities and also in the religious sector. You'll find out that there are hundreds of great engineers working in Bnei Brak, in Modi'in, in Nazareth, and in other places. Beersheba, also in the West Bank, and in Beersheba, of course. It is time to intensify the human talent. This is the biggest scarcity, and people should utilize it wherever they are. We need to be competitive as patriots, and this is exactly what I would advise to do.
So I want to just...
but maybe...
Yeah, do you want to say something?
Yeah,
sure. Go ahead.
So first of all, let's start factually. It was an interesting question, and also I think you asked specifically about India and Israel. So we were in this situation, and it's funny because it's one of the only countries outside of the U.S. where we've decided to open two R&D centers, actually both in India and in Israel. So that shows you that's really, it's not an or, it can be and. Look, I think there are real reasons for why, almost every international company you can think of has presence here. And it's definitely not just Google. It's, way before Google was born. I think IBM had the facilities here, and Intel had facilities here, and Microsoft later came and had facilities here, etc. So everyone is here. And the reason they're here is, I don't think, by the way, that it is, and that's what's important for me to say, because of Zionism. And it's not because, some execs in these companies may have been Jewish or have Jewish connections. They came here for a simple reason, because they found an abundance in talent that is rare to find worldwide. When you talk about Google, for example, our strategy is specifically to go where the talent is, right? So it could have been, at the beginning when Google was born, most of it was in Mountain View. But then we said, okay, we have such a big challenge, this vision of the company to try to help organize the world's information and make it relevant to everyone is so big that if we don't tap into the worldwide talent, we can't make it happen. And so we go where the talent is. So even in a small country like Israel, we've opened 2 R&D centers. It was opened also in India, also in China. I think these were the only countries outside of the US where we've invested so much. But the reason is factual. So we look at facts. We try to make decision by facts and not by political judgment, if you want. And I think it's a company that is based on decisions, on factual decisions. Then when you ask me, what is my role as a leader in this company, is to make sure that we are so good and the facts are so strong that I don't need to play a political judgment to bring the investment here.
Yeah,
I just want to make
go ahead.
With your permission, I just want to make a small introduction. Maybe you guys know each other, but we have here the CEO of Galil Software, Inas. I'm not going to embarrass you, but he's over there. Great guy. Inas runs Galil Software, which is a company out in Nazareth, employs over 100 engineers, working with companies, international companies, as well as local companies. And maybe it's time that Meir and you get to know each other if you don't know each other. But this is definitely one place where Israel needs to focus and bring more and more participants into the high-tech sector. There are great engineers in the Arab sector in Israel, and I know that the potential of recruiting many more engineers just in Galil Software is amazing. So bear in mind, if you really want to be patriotic, this is exactly where we need to go.
Okay, so I just want to... Thank you. It's been a tremendous panel. The book ends with the words of Shimon Peres, who's related to someone here. Probably the person we quoted most in the book, who said, one thing he said is that one reason for all this is that Jews or Israelis are dissatisfied. That's like, if you had to pick one word, explains all this. But another is that kind of his philosophy of life, which seems to be the philosophy of startups and of the startup nation as a whole, is that sometimes the most careful thing is to dare. And that's kind of the story of the startup nation that we're trying to tell here. We're trying to figure out where to go next. And thank you all for participating.
I have very little to add. Thank you, Saul. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience. Next time with your next book.